Do 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 do. Extras.
So for the first time in a long time, we've added a new player to the party, which seems a little odd, given we have so many NPCs that most are getting 0 screen time, but boom, Krillidin. Launchpad 1979, his Twitter handle, is an old friend of Quill18 and, I think, Little One? He's a much more serious programmer than I was, even before Operation Awesome Unemployment. And we've had a lot of fun on board game nights while our D&D campaigns have been on really long hiatus. So when Krillidin joined, right at the beginning of what became the Week of Hell in TDDC, I was pretty early into making TDDC videos. I think we were midway through Ginneron, so he had some familiarity with the world and with the party. But if you go watch like episode 9 or something, and then skip to episode 51, there was a whole lot of stuff he missed in between. Fortunately, only a small fraction of it mattered in the short term since they were now all isolated and stuck into Shadowfel. He was a little bit on the quiet side for the first couple of sessions, jumping into this long-established group, but he still gets some fun lines in, and he shoots real good. The character is a half-elf arcane archer, half Eladrin in our setting since it does make a little difference. The prestige class, right out of the DMG, isn't super strong, but it does give him some fun tricks, and it didn't cost much to get into. He's light on the arcane side, very heavy on the fighter, so he has a ton of feats, and when picking out his starting gear, with the significant wealth of a level 13 or 14, whatever they are, character, he picked up that crazy Bow of Splitting mod. It's a +3 weapon modifier, so it's very expensive, but as seen in the video, it basically doubles his shots, including doubling any other buffs or any spell that he stores in an arrow using his class features. So if he stores a Hail of Stone spell in an arrow, 5d4 damage in a 5-foot radius, he could hit the target with 10d4 worth of magic rocks. And, an arrow. Anyway, spoilers, that splitting power is going to get nerfed because it's super powerful. A +3 mod is expensive, but it's still a friggin' bargain for what is effectively ×2 damage on a high-level character. But the fun part for you is trying to guess how long we let that thing stand as is before nerfing it. As for how he ended up into Shadowfel, I think I'm going to leave that for episode 52. Shadow Maps. Yes, we finally got some more maps of the Shadowfel. If you were watching carefully, there was a wide map of the continent showing most of the borders of the Vampire Kings. But later we get a closer map with more actual terrain features, because that's the information the party had to help their decisions. Though in their case it was pencil scribbles over a bad photocopy of the map of Vistria. Of course, because the original map was scribbles on a photocopy, and because as we played there were a lot of rough estimated distances and travel times, making this new map both look better and attempt to reconcile all those times and distances is a real pain, and will definitely be fudgy in spots as the Week of Hell progresses, so please don't complain when their travel doesn't exactly match the scale. Anticipating some of your other questions, no, I have not mapped out all the shackles, even for the Swain/Cornello area. Realistically, that's a lot of work, and while it would be nice in places to be able to use that information, on the other hand, not having them mapped leaves me a lot more flexibility in the future. Yes, that does mean the node map I use sometimes when talking about shackles is purely abstract. And no, most of them don't have a huge mountain protecting them. There are a lot of smaller caves, trenches, obelisks, forgotten pools, and hidden valleys, stuff like that, many of which are protected in ways other than big dungeons. On the large map, their territories vary tremendously in size, but not all areas are equal in terms of the quality and quantity of spirits which are suitable for shackles. As seen previously, Cornello rules the Arctic continent, but like in most Civilization games, the pole is pretty poor land. I have apparently mixed up Hastings and Lockhart a lot in my head, but somehow I think I may have gotten them right the few places they come up in the videos. Lockhart has the vast eastern territory, much of which is low quality, but he's doing quite well overall. He's also the one with the hat. Hastings has been beaten down somewhat, but he possesses the area labeled as the Cauldron, which corresponds to the Iron Sea, the ancient Fadelands home of the dwarves. The Cauldron is home to a pantheon of very powerful spirit shackles, which have proven extremely hard to take from him, and which have allowed him to hold out against Alyssa and Lockhart. What's in the bad place? Bad stuff. Duh. I do really like the opportunity to do these Badguyvision segments and videos, showing things the player couldn't reasonably see in-game. Definitely not chronologically. I may have told them junk after the fact. Up until now, I have virtually never done it outside of post-credit scenes, though there was that quick flash over the Kuatoa sniper when they killed that weak-ass monitor. But I liked the idea of showing that Swain was hanging around to guard the maze, at least for a while, adding some tension whenever Little One suggested doubling back for it. Also, I figured people want more Swain. I also liked getting in the discussion at the end, though, to show how Swain reacted to being called out for his minion's theft. The Hazamura stuff, of course, was just a little bit more fun. That whole discussion was cut down in the video because, honestly, there was a bunch of exposition that you'd already heard or that really didn't go anywhere or was redundant with other information we already have. There was actually some question of whether the Rajas had been wrong to suggest the whole rescue run, given how it had gotten the party into trouble with Swain and Stuck. Lady Hazamura was quick to point out preemptively that it was over a month ago when the Rajas had last suggested this plan, and that things had changed enough in between that, had the party contacted them before leaving, they would have advised against it. Their excuse, for what it's worth, is that Vampire Kings are very powerful, very divination-resistant beings. The power of the Fate Matrix can still be very useful for major and long-term trends, but trying to predict what Swain would be doing in a month and where is a dubious proposition. It's like the difference between predicting the changes in overall climate versus the long-term weather forecast. Anyhow, according to her, if the players had gone soon after she told them about Zahir's transfer, particularly if they'd been in time to rescue him before he reached Mount Pillar, there would have been little chance of encountering Swain. Send the bolts away? Keen observers might have noticed Little One suggesting once that they should send away not only the NPCs but also the named Vampire King bolts. I kept that in intentionally, mostly as a hook for more explanation here, but the episode was already all discuss position, and I didn't think focusing on this part would help. But there was a line of discussion amongst the party for a while about the risks of keeping the bolts with them. Swain, having read Mora's memories, or at least her surface thoughts, some of which were presumed to include, "We have a special bolt for this guy," probably knows about the existence of the ancient Tataran artifact bolts now, including the one with his name on it. Assuming the bolts are any good, which they are assuming, though obviously we still don't know for sure, if one of the kings were to get a hold of the set, they might use them to gain the upper hand. Draven was sympathetic to this concern, but overall, the bolts are stored in an extra-dimensional compartment of the artifact crossbow, and if they're in a situation where a vampire king is stealing the crossbow out of Draven's hands, they're probably screwed anyway, so better to retain the option of using the bolts themselves, especially, if Swain catches up with them. Couldn't Draven just recast Ethereal Mount? Well, the spell-storing item Artificer Infusion is up to 4th level, so in reality, yes. But the real explanation is that although it is an official spell, and I used that in the video so I wouldn't have to explain this until this extras, in practice, we didn't know about that spell, or I at least had forgotten, and in the actual game session, I had described it as a 5th level spell, which I had made up, called Phantasmal Mount Mass, which happened to be nearly identical, except mine was 1 mount per level, instead of 1 plus 1 per 2 levels. So, using that made-up spell, it was both too high level for the standard Artificer on-the-fly scroll-making infusion, and it also sounded like a rare, non-official spell, which he might therefore need to research and or to level up in order to learn it himself. Other than the level difference, the differences between Ethereal Mount and my homemade version were so minor that it was much less confusing to just use the official spell in the video. And in the actual session, they didn't use the extra mounts anyway, since Zahir and Black Dad could only ride as passengers due to their health, and they didn't bring a spare for Krillidin because, back at the mountain, the party weren't planning on recruiting anyone. It's my Patreon patrons who make it possible to pay my bills while doing this full time. As one tiny nod to their amazing support, they get extras about a week early, giving them a chance to get some of their questions answered in the final video that goes out on YouTube. Mr. Top Hat 9 asked, I understand if it's meant to be a mystery, but I'd like to know whatever you can tell us about the Fate Matrix. I mean, the Rajas don't share any details, but it's clearly a way of referring to a complex system of divination that they use. All we can really surmise is it's some combination of Fey magic with arcana and or psionics. If you parse their words, you get the idea that it's not just one big matrix, or if it is, it's made up of smaller ones. They create a Fate Matrix for a specific entity of some sort. For example, they've made pretty clear that after Lord Kintomazu's encounter, they created a Fate Matrix specific to the party. It can give certain kinds of information on the present, but seems more focused on trying to discern future possibilities for the entity in question, and they use the interactions between these different matrices to try to model the future in broader terms, and to locate possible key events. Dimon asked, did the group ever identify the tentacle things beyond being aberrations? The bodies dissolve when they die, so there's not much left to research. So the party really don't know much about them. They cast spells, or at least spell-like abilities, but most of them seem unintelligent. And the only 2 times they've shown up is when dealing with enemies who are thought to be in league with the Mindhunters. Mysterious Gentleman asked,
I always assumed Swain was evil until I saw his interaction with Bolvon and how fair Swain was about it. What are Swain and the other vampire kings, alignment-wise?
This is why I don't like alignments. They, including specifically Swain, are evil by almost any definition. But it's possible to be evil in some ways and yet arbitrarily, seemingly contradictorily decent in others. Swain effectively consumes about 1 sentient being a day, which is especially monstrous given he could likely survive on the less optimal diet of non-sentient beings' blood, or could just take a survivable amount of blood from several people a day instead of killing them. But we've seen hints that if he chooses to acknowledge you as a person and an ally, or at least non-enemy, he can be perfectly decent to you. For all we know, these evil tyrants may have people who they care for, who they would sacrifice a lot to protect, and yet I would still call them evil both in-game and objectively. Most people are even harder to classify. Arthur D. Gonzalez Martin asked, are the Vampire King bolts for after you weaken the vamp, or used to just cripple it up front so you can fight it? Unfortunately, they didn't come with instructions. Thomas Dufour on Patreon, as well as Jemsky100 in YouTube comments, and Stan the Man and Silananil on the Discord asked,
back in episode 15, the PCs find a cache of mind-blank masks before encountering the Raj. Clearly that was some kind of planting for future Mindhunters. But what was this in-universe?
Well, the Rajas didn't build that place. Apart from working through those unfortunate bargains, Lord Kintomazu was there researching the ancient Adar crystals beneath the one city those ancients had left behind. Ancient ruins, including a cache of temporary mind-blank masks and dimensional anchor weapons, guarded by a 100% magic-immune golem. Ased Banal asked,
if the party had rescued Zahir en route to Mount Pillar, would you have left Black Senior to rot, or would the party have had another chance to save, or at least find out about him later?
As for William Gabriel Black, this is definitely where I wanted him to be, but had things gone differently, I probably would have revised his location situation at a later time to fit him back into the story. Remember, it's not a retcon if the players never knew your original plan. Trantos1 asked,
how does the multiple stacking forms of Mind Blank work? Because, as far as I know, there is only one Mind Blank spell in D&D. Would the party have to research new forms of the spell, or would they need to cast it 3 different ways, via divine, arcane, and psionic power?
Normally under the rules, you couldn't stack the same spell because there's no need for it. Since there is a need here, we have to make some allowances. And honestly, I'd be fairly easygoing about what counts as a different form of mind blank. The easiest way would be to have one normal casting of the spell, divine, arcane, or whatever, plus a mind blank item. But I'm sure with research they could find other ways. It should be possible to create a temporary item, like a scroll, which is modified to stack at slight additional cost. Sentient Construct asked,
Would it be possible to get a sneak peek of Lockhart's hat?
No. I want to thank all my generous Patreon patrons, but the 4th and final part of Saga of Balvan is coming out the day before Halloween, and as a special bonus, I'm going to try to get it out to Lore Master patrons and up tomorrow. So stay tuned for that, and please spoiler tag any discussion of it on the Discord, even in the spoiler chat room, until the official release on the 30th. Thanks so much for your continued support, with a special shout out to Thermor Ebrilius Bedimir Bigren Carlin, Corlin Dimmin Zombie Dustbar, and the Earl of Sanguine, Fright Night Fireborn, Git Hype, Gorfiend, Greenmute, Hackun, John, and 9. Jerry Beansman, Leah Crolonito, and Lord Avon, Malice, Zendesh, MG3D, OI1, and Olden Man, Onvir, Pedrig, Avruni, Pontus, Remar, Ulfis, and the Man, Starfall, Arkin, Surf USA, Tambu, June, and Valis, Volkfang, Brethren, Warsaw, Woodley, and now I am out of breath. The members of the organization.